talking about people not as the strongest link, but from my perspective, how people are and can enable to be more of a stronger link. Now, what I'm talking about today is how we make people the strongest link. And that's my first thought on it, is that actually humor can be really effective. And often when we're talking about cybersecurity, we make it very serious and very dry. And that means as soon as we start to say to people, we're going to talk about cybersecurity, they're expecting something sort of serious and dry and thinking that they're going to be bored. If we can turn that on its head, that's one way of getting engagement. Why is this so important? Of course, one of the reasons is the fact that people have become more and more important to cybersecurity for families, for organizations, for countries. And this is partly because of the huge rise that we have seen in social engineering. Over the last few years, it's become probably the biggest threat that my corporate clients come to us about. And we certainly see that this kind of combination of an external malicious attacker and people is what's at the heart of so many breaches, so many issues, not least, arguably, election hacking. So we're asking people to do things that are pretty much impossible. Don't click on suspicious links. Well, what's a suspicious link? How is someone supposed to identify that? And they have to click on links. That's their job. So we're making it very hard on people, but we're also not recognizing where people get it right. And there's a lot more that needs to go in this, because once you start looking for how we've made progress, you realize how far we have come from the early days where we're having the basic technical controls, where we're putting in place the first firewalls, the first antivirus, starting to use passwords. Fast forward to recent years, and we've moved on from just the basic technical controls and how we improve those to more human-based controls and a more human understanding of security. And for me, this is a change, a kind of a paradigm shift that we're starting to see in the industry, that is moving away from just trying to tick the box of the human side to actually looking at what is it that makes people tick, how do they behave, and how do we need to incorporate that into our approach. So, how do we do this? How do we think about people first? One thing that I think is really interesting, one element we can take from psychology, is the understanding of social proof. So social proof is the notion that if we as humans don't know what to do, we copy other people. With social proof, we look to other people in general, but anyone that we particularly respect, anyone that we admire, anyone in a position of authority, we are more likely to mimic. So when it comes to cybersecurity, leadership is so important. If the leaders of an organization or of a country or of a family aren't seen to be acting in the way that they are recommending, then people will follow the actions. If people are acting insecurely despite what they say, then they become the social norms. So what we need to do is speak to people in a more empowering way and embrace social proof. So why I am strategically optimistic is down to what's known in neuroscience as the optimism bias. Good news is that optimism makes people try harder. But if we can tell people, actually, these basic behaviors, good passwords, use a password manager, two-factor authentication, report phishing emails, if we tell people these basic practices will protect them from what, 95, 98% of the threat, which is true, then they're more likely to engage in those behavior. So that's my second recommendation, engage with positivity. So when we are talking to people about something scary and trying to change their behavior, we're engaging in what's known as a fear appeal. And that's led to this, which is known as the extended parallel process model. And this model is to show how you talk about something scary to get people to actually engage with the danger, rather than just engage with the emotional response, which is the fear. That those responses will be effective, and also that they are capable of engaging with them, that they have the time, the money, the technical know-how, the support, Only then, if we convince people of all of that, will they engage with the actual danger. If we don't, they will just engage with the emotion, the fear. So yes, we need to talk about the threat, but we need to do so in a way that recognizes the psychological response. And we also don't always have to try to use fear. We can think about how actually we can intrinsically motivate people. How do we spread empowerment rather than fear? And one of the most effective mechanisms I've found in a company is what's known often as a champions network, an ambassadors network, whatever you want to call it. People who are not cybersecurity experts, who act kind of like fire and safety marshals to represent cybersecurity in their department. And I've always worked on this within companies, but I think it's a great model outside of that. I think this can be used between companies. I think this could be used to scale up how we talk about cybersecurity, not just at a company level, but potentially at a national level. Because this is what we need. We need herd immunity. And as soon as we are lacking that, that's when we are all weaker. So that's always my final recommendation. How do we build a champions network? This stuff is not about having new messages. It's about how you shape the messages, how you frame communications to have the most impact and enable people to be the strongest link. Embrace social proof, engage with positivity, spread empowerment, not fear, and build a champions network. If you're interested in anything I've talked about today, and if you're not familiar with the behavioral economics, with the psychology, with the neuroscience, then these are 3 great books to start with. So that's my takeaway reading list.